All right, I think we're live now. Welcome everyone who's joining us. Well, I guess this evening for me, but also in the West Coast. It's I think around probably 4 o'clock right now. We're here to continue our Ask Me Anything series for Dynatrace here, recapping a lot of the exciting announcements and platform innovations that we have going on over here. I have one other joining me tonight. And I'll introduce her. It's Marky Doobie. She's with us tonight. How you doing, Marky?
Hey Brian, I'm good. How are you doing?
Good. I guess I'm emceeing tonight on this crazy train. Hopefully, we'll see if it's the last time I get this job. We'll see how this goes. So West Coast is good. Everything's good over there.
Hey, you know
The
what? The sun is out in Seattle. I'll take it.
There you go. Hey, that's awesome. All right. So we got Marky out west, myself, I'm over in Florida. So we got the whole thing covered. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to bring up some slides and just kind of recap where we're at, what we've covered already, and what we're going to cover today. So I'm going to go ahead and pull those up here. Looks like we can see that. Great. Already introduced ourselves. We're both principal solutions engineers here at Dynatrace. So go ahead and ask away your questions as we're going through this. We'll be sure to catch them and go along and answer them as we go along here. So let's dive right into it. So where are we so far? So we've covered three of them. We've around all the major announcements we've had around the platform and perform. We started kind of doing an overall overview at the beginning of March, and then we went into really diving into analytics around notebooks and dashboards, and then how do you ask all your data and do all the analytics with DQL. So today we're gonna go from just sensing data, analyzing the data, but then actually starting to do actions on that data, and that's what that May 9th is here. And then we're gonna wrap up this series at the end of the month here when we're gonna go into the App Engine. So this is where we're at right now. That's the topic for today. Like I mentioned, we've covered a lot already. A lot of you, if you're a customer using Dynatrace, likely you've probably seen a pop-up already kind of telling you about the new Dynatrace experience. We encourage you to check it out and see all the new great things that Dynatrace has to offer. You can get right into the new Grails and notebooks and apps, and then workflows today is what we're going to talk about with the new Dynatrace experience, right? So just to sort of recap, and I was actually at a workshop yesterday over in Tampa here with a lot of my customers, and one thing I described about Dynatrace is that for years we've been really great at the sensing with the one agent and collecting observability and telemetry data about your systems, right? And then we layered in over the years all of the observability prescriptive analytics around thinking and analyzing all that data that we're collecting. So think about the Davis root cause analysis, and then most recently with all of the analytics that you can do with Grail, asking your data any question you need. So today's topic, we're going to really talk about acting on all that data that you're sensing and thinking with, right? And that's the automation engine is, and that's what Workflows app is going to do for you. And that's what's really going to do is it's going to enable you and empower you as a Dynatrace user to take all this rich data that you're collecting and using, but then actually doing something with that data natively within the platform, right? Instead of having to do it with another, integration or solution, you can actually have Dynatrace take those actions for you in an automated, intelligent way, right? So ultimately, what you'll end up doing is optimizing, your whole digital footprint from there. So just to recap, Grail, this is all the underpinnings of where we hold all of this data. We started with logs and analytics, business events, metrics, and traces. So all of the observability data is going to be stored within Grail, right? And all of that is enabling you to be able to use this powerful Dynatrace query language to ask your data within Grail any question you need to with complex, powerful queries or simple queries, right? And then acting on all that data we're going to experience workflows today. And this is what it looks like. And we're going to walk you through some examples. I'm going to do a practical, very simple, straightforward example just to get everyone kind of familiar with it. And then throughout this discussion, we're going to talk about some more complex event triggers and tasks that you can run around workflows. All right. So what are the use cases that we have in mind when we brought this to the platform? So obviously simple things like workflow automation. So, hey, you have all this observability data around infrastructure metrics, for example, on your infrastructure. So maybe you want to automate the scaling up and scaling down of your cloud instances based on the Dynatrace telemetry data that you're collecting with it. Maybe you want to automate some certain security use cases. So if you see a new vulnerability come in, escalate it to certain paths or update certain tickets, right? And you can see that we can work through that. Automate the reliability and testing of your services and applications, and that'll be around the Site Reliability Guardian that we'll go through today. And then ultimately, shifting left as always to bring all of this rich data and these rich actions, earlier and earlier in your release cycle, so you can do more proactive optimization of your environment. And ultimately, you can integrate this into all the platforms that your organization is using. So this is a major one. We'll be talking about the Site Reliability Guardian app within our talk today, and how that works with workflows. So Site Reliability Guardian will automate the validation process of your services and applications, and then that it can integrate and couple tightly with workflows, where you can have workflows kick off and run your guardians for you to validate your SLOs, so you don't have to do that on your own. You can have Dynatrace do that for you. And then another concept that we're gonna touch on today during our workflows is the concept of ownership within Dynatrace. So this is a new concept that we're bringing to Dynatrace around. You have all of these entities that Dynatrace is monitoring and collecting telemetry data for you. Having that ability to have management over team ownership of all those different assets and services, to automatically tag certain entities and services and applications, and then tie that to our workflows to really build out dynamic workflows where you can have it fit multiple teams in multiple situations. And Marky and Marky and I are going to get into that later today as well. So these are the types of data that ownerships will bring to the forefront, details about the team, contact information, et cetera, et cetera. So that's pretty much it. I'm not I didn't want to go to, slide you guys out too much. Hopefully you didn't fall asleep on there, Marky. I hope that was all right. But
the real stuff's always so much more interesting. But
that's right. I know. Yeah.
This is important to kind of set that level set, though. I mean, it's one of those things, like you said, we do a great job of discovering the data and understanding things like the dependencies and root cause analysis and being able to pull that together. But now that's that next step, right? What do I do with that, right? I need to take action on it, right? I don't necessarily want to wake everybody up at 2:00 in the morning. Maybe I just want to roll back a deployment. Maybe I just want to, send that ticket out to a third party or Jira. So those are the kind of things that we really want to dive into. And for me, this is just kind of the next level of what we've always done.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself. So yeah, let's dive into it then. So what I wanted to show everyone, and again, as we're going through this, go ahead and ask, questions as we're going through this. But I just want to sort of walk you through kind of a practical, simple use case, set up one of these workflows in here. So what you're looking at here is a notebook I've been playing around with in my Dynatrace environment. And again, as we speak, these last couple of weeks, this new UI, new Dynatrace experience has been rolling out. This upgrade has been rolling out to all of our customers. So please dive right into it. We encourage you to take a look at this. This will be right there for you to check out. So notebooks, we've already gone over this before. And this situation, what's going on is the scenario is that we're in operations looking over a trading application, easytrade.com. It's a little bit better than Robinhood, but it's a good trading platform that people like to go to. So what we're doing here is I'm kind of analyzing the different biz events that we have going on, buying assets and selling assets. We have trading and withdrawing cash. So a lot of transactions occurring. And one of the key transactions, that I as an operations person care about to look after is the buy assets event. Specifically, we want to know for the compliance team whether or not certain traders or accounts are possibly doing some suspicious activity based on the amount of trading volume that they're trading. So you can see here, this is an individual event. You can see the account ID, how many stocks were traded, what the price of that stock was, that asset was at one point, and then ultimately the trading volume. So we're collecting all these
So Brian,
events today. Yeah, go
I
for
was
it.
just sorry, just before you dive into that, I think this is really
Mhm.
important piece to note is if you think about that, like we're looking at, okay, what is suspicious behavior? That
Mhm.
is never a question that you and I have been able, right, have talked about from a
Right.
Dynatrace perspective for, right, however
Exactly.
long collectively we've been doing this,
Totally.
right? That's not a question we've been able to ask before. And now,
Right.
right, we have that capability, right?
Yeah.
And not with the Grail backend and with the workflows and with DQL, we can start thinking about those different type of questions. And I think that's kind of a key piece to pick up here too.
Yeah, you nailed it. And that's something I've been kind of telling my customers as well, especially at the user group. Is that for years and years and years, Dynatrace, we've been really the best at it when it comes to prescriptive observability use cases. And but that's kind of been what we still do that today, right? But with this the new platform backend and the new experience on top of it, like you said, I mean, we're just opening up really any and all use cases. So analytics from a generic standpoint, right? So like we're doing now, you're tasked to look for suspicious activity. That's typically not something you would do from, just an observability platform, right? Now we can do that today, really anything. So yeah, good point. So these are some buy events that we're collecting, right? So we have a workflow. Instead of I got better things to do than stare at dashboards all day, right? So I could stare at this notebook, or I could build a dashboard and go see if a record comes in with over $1,000 in trading volume. But I'm kind of lazy. I'd rather be playing Warhammer in my free time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a workflow that will automatically look for any events that come through, in this case, buy events, that come in where somebody purchased over $1,000 and did a buy event with over $1,000 in trading volume. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and title it under workflows. I'll go ahead and call it look for suspicious activity. I'm really creative, as you can see here. Actually, we'll call it compliance. How about that? Trading volume
You keep it
workflow.
semi-official, you know.
Yeah, that's right. Like, we're all professionals here, right? So first thing, what I was going to point out here is the trigger. So this is going to be the thing that's going to kick off this workflow. So these are kind of the options that you have here. So an event trigger, that could be like, if I see an event that is, XYZ criteria. So in this case, we could just simply look for, hey, if you see an event with a trading volume over 1,000, trigger that. Or it could be a Davis problem trigger. So as you know, if you're a Dynatrace user, we have Dynatrace Davis under the hood that's watching everything in your environment, looking for anomalies. And if a problem occurs, it'll actually point out a root cause of that. So you can use Davis problems themselves as a trigger, and the nature of those problems as a trigger. I had a customer that had an example where they built a workflow. They were a preview customer of ours a couple months ago when they were first looking at this. They said, we love the problem screen. It's super valuable to us, but we want to make a workflow that triggers off of, if a problem has multiple application issues associated with it. Because if it's multiple applications that are having a problem, we think this could be a world end, like a really bad event that's going on, and we want a special workflow for that. So that would be like an example of that. Davis event trigger, those are kind of like those sub events that you would have within a problem ticket. Let's say if you look at the problem evolution graphic. So within a problem, you could have, CPU spikeage, you could have response time increases, you could have disk over, right? You have all these events that make up a problem. So you can have a granular event trigger as well. Good old fashioned scheduling, right? So everyone, they're always, until the end of time, we're always going to be asked to run a report for, on a certain day, on a certain time interval, a certain cron schedule, right? So we have all of those kind of just classic reporting schedule capabilities as well. And then on demand, right? And we're just going to do on demand today to keep it simple. On demand is as simple as, hey, you build this workflow where I want to be able to go in and just, click run. So I'm going to pick on demand. So that'll be our trigger. And then once you figure that out, what you're going to want to do is then have it start building out tasks. Now, again, this one's going to be pretty simple. And we have just a few actions here. And Marky's going to show you basically all the actions that we have built into our demo environment too, with all the integrations that you're going to be able to see. This is just my cute little lab environment. So I only have a few listed here. But you can see here what you can start to do. So one of the tasks could be something like execute a DQL query. So we're going to do that today, but just to kind of go through the other ones as well, run an HTTP request, right? So that could be like, hey, if you see, a disk fill up on this host, I want you to run an HTTP request to the AWS API to go resize that disk, right? Or a webhook or something like that. Or it could be go check this port. It could be really any kind of HTTP request you would want to run, or straight up just run
gather
JavaScript
information
code.
from external, right, instance, right? I want to be able to
Perfect.
query information from AWS that's going to marry with what I already have in Dynatrace, right? So it just kind of goes above and beyond. I want to make that API call and have it as part of the built-in piece, which again, up to this point, Dynatrace triggered a problem. That's great. It would send out a notification for it, right? We could do a webhook, but that's where we stopped. And this is where we can kind of keep going.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like you're doing complex actions, beyond just maybe a simple notification. And like you could even run like what you see right here, just whole JavaScript code. And that's kind of where we're going back to the conversation of we're a whole lot more than just doing observability prescriptively now. I mean, you can do all sorts of things. Really, your imagination here is your limit. I was funny. I was talking to again one of my customers yesterday, and it was like, man, you guys, it's a tough pitch because you don't want to say that you can do everything, because that's usually when people tune out and they say, okay, sure, buddy, right? But we kind of can do anything right at this point. So all I can say is, try it for yourself and you can see, right? So
I've lost track of the number of times in the last week I've answered a question with, yeah, we can do that with workflows.
Right. It's like, yeah, sure. Yeah, we can do it. Why not? Yeah. Build a workflow. Yeah. So it's really exciting. So there's a couple other tasks, and we'll take you for a tour of the other ones, but we'll focus on just running. We'll just run a DQL query. So we'll go ahead and call this one check, hi, let's say trade volume, right? And that'll be the name of this action. So, we'll go ahead and save that workflow. And I did cheat a little bit and I created a query over here, but I'll explain what it is. Oops. Let's see. And I'll go ahead and throw that in here, and I'll kind of explain what we're doing. So it's a lot like that query I had in my notebook. So basically what we're doing is we're saying, hey, grab the events over the last couple hours and filter them for the buy assets events, and the trading volume has to be over 1,000, right? Take those events, summarize them by the account ID, the trading volume, and the timestamp of that transaction, and then sort by the trading volume. So you're going to get, the highest record, the highest trading volume, the account ID, so where to focus on right away. So that's going to be our first task. And then again, this next task is just going to be a simple kind of notification to the compliance team. So we're going to add our next task after that DQL query. And then what we're going to do is this one's going to be a Slack notification. So this one will be, hey, let's go ahead and send a report, to our compliance team. So that'll be kind of what this is here. I'll go ahead and kind of give it a little name. And what we can do, and we'll show you this too. We created a connection with our Slack server here, our Slack channels here, and then we have an ops kind of notifications channel that we're gonna care about here. And what we'll do is we'll go ahead and drop in sort of what we want that format to look like within our Slack message that we're sending to our ops notifications compliance team. In this case, this is basically just Slack nomenclature at this point, but essentially what it's doing is it's saying, hey, grab the results of this previous query that you just ran, and then summarize it by the account IDs, the trading volume, and the timestamps that you found, right? And that's kind of what it's going to do there now. So what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and make sure everything looks good. And at that point, we can just go ahead and hit run. And hopefully, if I didn't mess it up, we can see it go ahead. And yep. And I just got my Slack notification. I got my cool little notification on my channel. You can see it successfully posted to Slack. You can see logs if there are any. The query successfully ran. It returned 10 results and then sent that right over to Slack. So super simple kind of use case there. Just wanted to kind of show everyone here, the audience, that's kind of mechanically how you would build one out. Now, obviously, they get much more complex and useful than a simple use case like this. And I think that's what, Marky, I think you're gonna kind of dive into that so far. After that, anything you want to add to that before you kind of show your stuff you're going to show?
No, I think you made a few really good points there. Is that, again, because this is multi-step and because we can kind of add a little bit in there, we can do things like pass the results through, and we can have that flexibility. I mean, just that Slack message itself, being able to have the flexibility of how we want to format that and what we want to pass in, that alone, right, is going to be kind of a huge up level for how we're integrating with other systems, right? We're using Slack here, but again, you can do a HTTP request. You can send it anywhere you want, right? And any of your ticketing systems, automation systems, we have that flexibility now.
That actually might be a good first thing to show if you go to all the out of the box integrations that we have in our demo environment. Or I can pull it up here real quick here too as well. Let's see here. Why don't we go ahead and do that? I will share this next screen. Let's see. We're also watching for questions as well, so feel free if anybody has any questions. So bringing my screen up again here, if we go to workflows, just to kind of give you an idea of the different actions that will be available to you. So, obviously I did sort of a simple, execute DQL query and, sent a Slack message, but just to get you an idea of what our lab is working on here and the different types of actions that you can take, right? And kind of turnkey integrations that we're going to have with various platforms out there, like, hey, cancel a job in Ansible, or, delete a cluster with Argo, or, detach a volume in AWS, right? So all of these major platforms out there, we're going to be able to, integrate and have these turnkey, integrations with that our lab is going to ship with here. But then, of course, like you said, if we don't have a fancy turnkey integration, we have that sledgehammer of, if you know the JavaScript, go do whatever you want, right? So
custom JavaScript, custom API call, right? We have those options.
Exactly.
And yet, that's a really good point there, Brian, because again, this is one of the things that we are thinking about is doing things like integrating with your existing pipeline tools, Argo CD and AWS API calls. These are all things that our lab is actively building out so that we have the ability to work into your existing tooling, into your existing pipeline. And that's always been kind of the heart of what Dynatrace tries to do anyways, right? We want to make sure that we know you have other systems in your ecosystem, right? You have other tools you're going to work with. You have things like ticketing systems. So we want to make sure that we're marrying into, right, that scenario.
Absolutely. So it looks like we might have our first question here. We got Benita tuning in from Dallas. Nice. Look at that. Quick question on alerting. Is there a way to add a timer to an alert so it's only trigger after it stays above a threshold for an extended time? So yeah, I think that's something we can do today. That we, that's been, sort of you can certainly do that probably in a workflow type fashion. But even before workflows came out, when you make a custom event, metric event, I believe is what it's called, you can basically go in the settings and you basically tell it to alert only after a certain time interval. So yeah, you should be able to do that, and you should be able to find that in the settings there when you do a custom metric event. So good
Yeah,
question.
even with alerting profiles, we can do that as well, right? The problem has to be open for 10 minutes or 15 or 30 minutes, right? That's something that's already existing in the platform. But
Yeah.
again, with the workflows, you can see there is some additional function flexibility there too. And that's actually part of what I'm going to kind of get into with some of the more in-depth workflows that we go through now, because there's different options that you can kind of plug in here to pull it up. So let me go ahead and do a quick share.
All right, sounds good. Let's see, and I'll be looking for other questions here. Yep, just keep them coming in, folks, if you have any more. And that.
So as I'm kind of bringing this up here, you'll see, I mean, I personally prefer the dark background, so I get a little bit different look and feel
is this
to
some kind of
Brian's,
statement
right?
or something over here? We have the.
But I mean, again, this is one of the things that, I mean, even us, we're having fun with this, right? Because you can customize this to your own needs, right? You can customize this to your own work styles. Not only the workflows that we're going to talk about primarily today, but also things like the actual UI itself, right? And how you're interacting with Dynatrace. So this is kind of opening up a lot of doors for us as we go through. So I'm going to walk through a couple other kind of workflow examples here, and we can talk through different use cases, because I do think this is something that's interesting in that, right? Again, to the question of, can we wait a certain amount of time before we actually trigger that alert? Absolutely, right? Make sure that that's threshold that you're setting is still there, right? Maybe you want to go back in and check and make sure it hasn't resolved before you trigger, right, that additional ticket or that additional Slack message, or right, trigger a restart or a resize of the system, right? If it righted itself, you want to be able to prevent that. So those are
Make it
always
extremely
things you can kind of add
conditional.
in.
Yep.
Exactly, right. And that's the big thing here is too, we have the ability to add in conditions, right? And logic to these settings, and you can have multiple different scenarios for what that looks like. So what I have here is just kind of an extension onto what Brian was already talking about. So here we're talking about, again, an on-demand trigger, but I can always change this, right? I can always set this up so it's running on a schedule, or right, running off of maybe an external trigger. This could also be something that I'm triggering from outside of Dynatrace, right? And I can call in and trigger this off. So you have some different options here for being able to pull this out. But here I'm going through, I'm kind of pulling in the trigger itself. And then what I'm now doing is the same thing. I'm going out and I'm using DQL. So I'm querying Dynatrace and saying, okay, I'm looking for, right, give me the top errors, right, for the last 24 hours. Right? I want the last, right, 10 of those errors, and I want to be able to pull those in. But I don't just want to be able to pull those in, right, and view them here in Dynatrace, because that's one piece. That's what I can do with a notebook or a dashboard. But now I actually want to do something with those. Again, we're taking that next step and that next action. So here you can see there's a couple things that are actually happening out of this individual, right, trigger itself, where I'm going through and grabbing those errors out of the logs. Now what I'm actually doing is I'm taking a couple different actions. So I'm going through and saying, okay, I want you to take the results of that query and send them to Slack. So again, this is kind of the workflow that Brian was just walking through here. But you'll see I can actually flip this a little bit, and I can do a couple other steps too. I'm not relegated to just 111. I can kind of expand.
So what you're saying is you're just trying to say that you're more creative than me, I guess. But, yeah, that's fine.
I just have more complex thoughts on occasion. Sometimes I overcomplicate things, and that's okay. But that's when you bring me back down to earth, right?
Sure.
You central, you center me a little bit. So here again, you can see we're going through, right? We're pulling that in, we're sending it to Slack. Okay, that's one piece done. Now what I also want to do is take that information and do some extra manipulation, maybe some processing of it. Maybe I want to go out and query another external system, pull in that data and merge it together with this information. Again, you can kind of just sky's the limit here for what we can actually do. And being able to go through and actually pull out that information, again, and kind of do a little bit of mapping with this, I have that flexibility because now I can actually do some of this custom scripting within the Dynatrace platform itself as it's being rolled out. And then what I'm also doing is I've got kind of a third flow here that's happening is I'm saying, okay, in addition to this, in addition to sending it to Slack, I want this to be a little bit longer term tracking, right? I don't just want to rely on my developers to go into Slack and make sure they're checking that Slack channel, right? Because I mean, if you're anything like me, I've got about 50 Slack channels that I'm in. So I want to make sure that it's getting attention.
Oh, yeah,
So
my
I can
channel
also
list
go
is a
through.
mess. I have like anxiety when I look at it. It's sort of like when you let your house go too much, you know?
So, one of those things we want to do is we want to have custom tracking for this. So we use something like Jira to do that. Again, it's a system it's a platform that's probably already in your environment or something very, very similar to that, where you're doing issue tracking, you're doing ticket tracking. So you can tie into that. So in this case, what we're actually doing is we're creating a new ticket, a new issue in Jira. So we have this built-in integration that can do that. And you'll notice here, I'm kind of pulling up this individual connection. And Brian mentioned this earlier with Slack, and I'll dig into this a little bit more as well. But we have the ability to kind of pre-configure these connection points from Dynatrace so that as administrators, you have the ability to kind of control, what are those different endpoints that can be hit? What systems are we actually sending data to? So you do have some control around that as well. And you'll see here we're doing things like limiting what endpoints can actually be hit through JavaScript. So somebody can't just try to sneak in an API call into their JavaScript layer there. They actually have to be kind of pre-approved. What endpoints can I hit? Where can this go? And at the same time, we also have the ability, and you'll start to see these new menu items pop up as well in your settings, again, for those of you who are Dynatrace administrators, where you can actually pre-configure these connection sets. So that way your end users and your rest of your team can actually reuse those connections. And you're not having to set up a new token or new configuration every time you want to go through and do that. So you'll see here, these are the different Slack connections that we have set up in one of our environments. So we can do some testing and we can do some validation there. And the same thing is true for things like the Jira connections, right? We can pre-configure that so we have that integration point in place. And again, we're not having to juggle tokens, anything like that in our scripts. It's just simply in the platform itself. So it makes it that much more secure.
Yeah, it's really great that we kind of have those easy sort of setup wizards, right? So like instead of we're going to provide you, the turnkey kind of easy setup integrations, but then when you need it, we're also providing you that super powerful tool on top of it to do those custom use cases. So we're really hoping to address all those.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. While still making sure that your data is secure, right? That it's staying in the places you want it, right? And allowing your teams the flexibility to kind of build into those other systems as well.
Yep.
So here, if I go ahead and run this, you'll see it's going to do the kind of the same thing that Brian was talking through earlier. Again, what we're doing is we're triggering the DQL, we're sending it out to Slack. Again, I'm creating that ticket, and then I'm actually taking the results from that Jira ticket call and sending that to Slack again. So not only am I sending the results of that DQL query to Slack, now what I'm also going through and doing is I'm actually saying, okay, I created this Jira ticket. Now I want to put that as a reference as well. So now my developers have no excuse, right? Because they have the results and they have the Jira ticket, which they know is going to get tracked. And I make fun of developers because I'm married to one, so I can. But again, these are the guys that, they get inundated with so many requests and so many things. And we want to make sure that we have a way to track this. So as much as we want to automate this process, we also want to make sure, right, that things are being focused on the way that they need to be, which is why we're looking at some of these out-of-the-box configurations with these tools. And again, you'll see here we kind of have different options for how I want to trigger these different pieces and what that looks like. You'll see I'm looking at the results of the workflow now. So I can actually go through each of these layers and check the results and check the steps and see exactly, right, what that looks like it was going through. And then I can also flip back over and I can edit this workflow if I need to. So I can always add more to this. Right? I have the ability to kind of go through and pick that up. And Brian was mentioning as we're kind of going through here that, you know, we have these different integrations and these different endpoints, and a couple of these integrations that are coming through is, right, these ones here, where we're talking about things like the ownership of these monitored entities and things like the hosts and the applications that we're monitoring. And this is a concept that's really, we've been talking about for years, but we've always kind of done it through things like tagging or through some metadata that we're passing into the environment. Now it's its actual own independent configuration within Dynatrace, which is going to kind of augment some of this functionality.
Yeah, and what's really going to help with this too is, and I think you're going to go through an example that has an ownership in here anyway, but really this will allow you to use the same workflow for multiple owners. Because like the first thing when I was kind of talking to my customers about this at first, they're like, oh shoot, am I gonna have to make a workflow for every individual team? I don't want to do that, right? No, but that's what this will help out with. So you can really make these sort of dynamic and able to kind of pivot to whatever team or ownership is with them. So
yeah, I again had the exact same conversation 2 days ago with one of my accounts on, right? I have all of these different applications and I want to send them all independent alerts. But please tell me I don't have to create a workflow for everyone, right? So the fact that we know it's built in is awesome.
I mean, no offense to anyone who likes busy work, but if you like busy work, then fine. We're not going to stop you to create as many workflows as you want.
Again, I'll go back to the engineers, I'll go back to the developers. They will tell you all day long, every day, if you can automate it, why aren't you automating it, right? It's, totally. I will sit there and bang away at something that's going to take me an hour to do, and my husband sits there and he's like, why don't you automate it? Well, it's going to take me 2 hours to automate it, but I know it'd be faster every other time I do it. By the way, it doesn't take 2 hours to build a workflow, right? You saw how quickly Brian just built one, right? It's point and click, it's drag those pieces in. You have that flexibility to kind of come back to it as well. So here you'll actually see we're changing things up a little bit. So this workflow is actually not utilizing the on-demand, right? So I promise it works in other scenarios too. In this case, we're actually going through and we're picking up a custom event that's coming in. So Brian talked about earlier the different type of events that we can feed in. Sometimes it's a problem event, sometimes it's a Davis event, sometimes it's just, hey, something happened in my environment. And one of those big events that we're talking about all the time is deployments. I pushed it into deployment and something broke, or I pushed it into deployment and something's running slow, or who pushed this deployment, right? Sometimes those are questions too. So those are different type of events that we can actually capture as well, and that's just built into your pipeline, and we can utilize that within Dynatrace. So one of the things that we can actually do here is when that event is triggered, right, we can actually take advantage of some of those other different event or different actions that are already available within the workflow that Brian again touched on a little bit earlier. So here we've got a call to our site reliability guardian, so we can actually go out and do a validation on that deployment. Deployment went out. We want to actually make sure it's still meeting our standards. Is it still meeting our SLOs? Are we seeing an increase in errors? Are we seeing a degradation in performance? We need to know that before we keep pushing it up the chain. Maybe it's just in staging right now and we're getting ready to push to prod, or maybe it just went to prod, or it's a canary release and we want to validate it. This is where we can actually build into that pipeline. So we use the Site Reliability Guardian to be able to go through and do that. So the Site Reliability Guardian is one of the new applications that's being launched with the new Dynatrace platform and the new UI that you're hearing us kind of talk so much about here. And what this really allows us to do is go through and do those validations. right? I can go through and I can use things like DQL to check the status of what's coming through. I can actually go through and check against my SLOs, make sure I'm meeting those standards, and right, did I pass or did I fail? Right? And then what action do I need to take? And again, it's about taking the results of that step and being able to flow that into the rest of the workflow. Another thing that I think is kind of important to note here is these are two different apps within Dynatrace that are talking to each other, that are working with each other. So you have the ability to do things like trigger one from another. So I don't want you to think of this as like multiple different applications. You have to deploy all of them and you have to set them up all independently. They do run independently, so they have that flexibility, and we can do things like upgrade them independently, but it's still one platform. And they have that interconnectivity and that same underlying data they're all working from. So that really allows us to kind of go back and forth between them and do these type of triggers where I can actually take advantage of the fact that that's already pre-built. I don't have to rebuild this in JavaScript. It's already there, right? With additional functionality to boot. So now I can actually pull that back in and utilize that.
That's pretty
So
cool.
once
Yeah,
I do
and
that,
we'll go through the site reliability guardians, and I'm sure the next AMA, and what's really great about that, if you're familiar with the concept of SLOs, you can really build, like Marky was saying, holistic health validations across your system. So yeah, and we'll learn about that more on the next one too as well.
yeah, absolutely. We're going to be going through in more detail the app engine in general and some of these new custom apps that are being released. So you're going to hear a lot more about the Site Reliability Guardian as well. And then we were talking about ownership earlier and the ability to kind of go through and pick up those details. So here's a quick example of really what that allows us to do. So by going in and actually having the ability to define owners of these individual application components, again, for those of you who've used Dynatrace for years, there's things like tagging, there's things like management zones and alerting profiles, and we can use that functionality. But now we have something that's really dedicated to this use case, right, with this ownership category. And what this ownership category allows us to do is tie together not only who is the owner, but how do they want to do things like get notified? Right? Maybe I want to connect in something like a Microsoft Teams channel or a Slack channel, and I just want to have that as my already set list. So to Brian's point from earlier, we want to be a little bit dynamic about this. We don't want to set up a workflow for every team. So this is exactly what's happening here. We're going to go through, we're going to do that validation of the application, and that could involve 5 or 6 different teams that are all contributing to that. Well, then when we get the results of it, right, then we find out, okay, did this succeed or fail? If it failed, who do we notify, right? And so we can look at things like the ownership classification of that particular application or that particular application component. And then we have the ability to then go out and say, okay, for those owners, how do I actually, right, connect to them? So what's their Slack channel, right? What's their Teams channel? What's their email? And I have the ability to pull in those individual pieces. And this is all pre-configured as well. So we have the ability to pre-populate, right, this information so we have it at the ready. Again, going
that's
back
so great. So you don't have to sorry to interrupt. Yeah, that's so. I just want to double tap on that because that's so great. Because you don't have to, hard code, so to speak, a specific Slack channel for every single task there, right? You simply just have a drop down that says, "Hey, I send it to the Slack channel of this team, for this team here," right? So that's just a really cool capability. Yeah.
No, it really is too, because that's one of those things where, okay, well, the owners of this application changed, right? Inside of our organization, maybe we need to change how they do that. They move from Teams to Slack. How do we actually shift everything?
Totally.
I don't want to go back and reconfigure every alert, right?
Absolutely.
Flip the teams, flip the ownership here, and it's done. And we have that kind of flexibility that's built in as well. So you'll see here, we can kind of pick and choose, right? Who's responsible for this, right? And when you think about ownership as well, it's also important to note it could be different owners for the application. We could have a business owner, we can have a development or application team owner. So we have the ability to kind of pull those different pieces together and pick that up as well.
It looks like we
Really
have a
nice.
question that just came in here. So from Orlando, so AutomationEngine is a module within Dynatrace, or is it an additional install, or is it available on SaaS deployment versus managed deployment? Okay, so yeah, good question. So it is currently it's SaaS only. So if you have a Dynatrace SaaS tenant that's running in AWS, which is most customers that have Dynatrace SaaS, um, it's there. You'll be able to upgrade to the new UI and you'll see workflows. Now, to actually use the workflows, your tenant does also need to be Grail enabled, right? So we can totally do that. Just reach out to your account team and we can work with you on getting Grail enabled on your SaaS tenant, and then we can get you going on these workflows. So really easy, quick process there. Just get in touch with your account team and we can work with you. Great question, Orlando.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also important to note that this is something that we announced a few months ago. We started talking about this at Dynatrace Perform back in February, but we actually started launching it this month. So you probably have not seen this in your Dynatrace tenants yet, but you're going to. In the next couple of weeks, this is going to be an option for you to be able to turn on and take a look at. So absolutely reach out to your account team if you're interested. If this is looking like something you want to start trying out, right? We can absolutely get this set up for you.
It's funny. We actually, to that point, we had our big Tampa Bay user group here at Dynatrace, and I was thinking I was going to walk into that room and wow everyone with a bunch of stuff they'd never seen before. But I was already at a bunch of power users already. They're like, "Oh yeah, we saw the pop up. I've already clicked it. Look at see, I'm doing all that." And I'm like, "Man, I'm not going to be like this crazy wizard anymore. It's like this is going to be boring now because you already get it all." But that was good. We only had a couple of them.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's one of those things where it's that easy to start picking up,
Yep,
right? And
totally.
that's actually a really good point to make too. Is we want to come in and be like, look, this is really cool, and this right. Oh yeah, I did that last week, right?
Right.
I don't think anything right explains how easy and how much you can kind of do point and click and start trying this stuff out as good as that.
Pretty painless upgrade process, if you ask me. That's not bad for software. Just click a button. So, yeah.
So yeah, and I mean, now we have the results of that. So we have the owners, right? And again, now we can actually feed that into our next step, right? And we can use that as the option to kind of feed into, right? Who do we send this information to? What does that look like? And we have the ability to kind of pull in the results, right, of that status. So you'll see we're just kind of wildcarding, or not wildcarding, but turning this into a variable. I can't think of the term right now, but right, we're parameterizing this. There we go. So we can use this in later steps and be able to carry that through. And you can do your own kind of parsing of that and what that looks like as well.
And it looks like we got one more question that's coming here from Benita. Question number two. Great. Every tool has pros and cons. What are known challenges Dynatrace is facing working on today? I mean, honestly, I mean, from my perspective, I guess it would just be kind of doing the evangelizing of all this new stuff, right? So, Dynatrace, as everyone knows, has been around for a long time, right? So, we started ages ago, kind of in the APM space, kind of invented tracing, and we've grown into having this amazing observability platform. But then we're continually adding amazing capabilities like this, and sometimes it's like, oh, I just gotta, how are we going to keep up with all the evangelization of it? It's doing stuff just like this, but that's typically, that's kind of what from my perspective, what I think about today. But it's a good challenge to have, I would say.
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, it's one of those things where every day when I talk to a customer, they bring up a new concept to me that I hadn't thought of, right? Because, I mean, Brian, to your point, up to this point, we've done a lot of very prescriptive, right? This is observability, and here's some best practices, and we do really well at that. We still do that, right? But there's always that one little use case of, well, what if I want to look at it this way, right? Or what if I want to do that? So every time I have one of those conversations, a little light bulb goes off. And I'm like, okay, now I have to go figure out how to do it, right?
Now I got to go think about that now.
Today, now I can go back to the lab and be like, all right, guys, this is great. This is what we need to do. And what's great about our team is we have the ability to do that, right? And we have the ability to do that type of feedback. And, if you talk to our customers today and you talk to the groups that we work with, they're going to give you that same feedback of, yeah, you know what, we requested this feature and it showed up, right? And, we love partnering with our customers on, let's talk through your use case. Let's figure out what you're doing to be able to make sure that works, because it doesn't make any sense for us to build a tool that's not useful for anybody.
Totally.
All right, I know we got about 9 minutes left here, so keep those questions coming, guys. Really appreciate it. I will walk through just kind of maybe one more example here as we're wrapping up, because I promised you some logic and I promised you some external calls. So I'll pull up a quick example.
Wow,
of what
this
that
one
looks like too.
this one can turn left and this one turns right. This got different directions it can go in now. That. It's getting a little wild and crazy in here.
I know we're doing a little bit, we're getting a little bit more advanced here.
No, we got one more question that came in here. So sorry. Let's can Dynatrace AutomationEngine be managed via code, maybe via Monaco 2.0? So yeah, there's no reason why I could see why you couldn't do something like that. Like just to what you said, Mark. Oh, maybe I didn't think about that. But all of this is typically exposed via API, right? It's great to drag and drop and point and click and do what we're doing right now. But there's no reason why you couldn't set all these things up possibly via, an API or something like that with sort of like a Monaco-like solution. So yeah, good question. I don't know if you have anything to add there.
No, I mean, I think it's an excellent question, because that is one of the things that we can do right now is import and export these workflows through the API, right? That is something that's being done. Now for Monaco 2.0, again, we made some very recent pretty significant upgrades to that, which is why it's 2.0 now, as far from that concern, from that point. But I do want to point out that as you guys are kind of coming in and looking at this, keep in mind, this is an upgrade. This is being added into the platform. So as we're doing that, we're also adding in those brand new API endpoints, which didn't exist before because workflows didn't exist before. So Monaco is going to get upgraded in the same way, right? To be able to continue to work with these new API endpoints. So even if you don't see it in Monaco 2.0 today, keep in mind that's always something that we're looking to expand with the new functionality and the new APIs that we have. But yeah, you can absolutely build this workflow, right? Export it out, make your own tweaks to it. It's just JavaScript in a lot of places, right? A lot of those individual pieces. So you can add in the JavaScript tweaks and then re-upload it. Use your own code.
Have a catalog for your teams, repos. Yeah. So
exactly. And again, that's something we're actually doing as a team too, right? Hey, this workflow is really cool. I think other customers would be able to use it. I want to share it with my team. So having things like these in repos gives you that flexibility and the automation piece, right? Because it's the automation engine. So you have to be able to automate it.
It's like it's in the name or something.
I know, right? Wait, maybe we've thought about that. All right, we're getting to the point of the stream where we're starting to make movie references, and I need to stop.
That's right.
But again, just kind of jumping back in here real quick. So again, you see things where we have the ability to trigger external calls, pull more information from Dynatrace itself. We want to do that as well. Query, in this case, this is a security vulnerability alert. So maybe I want to query the National Vulnerability Database, go out, pull in more information, more background around that vulnerability, and have that out there ready. I can actually go through and be able to pull that in. And then I can do things like, all right, in this case, I don't want to create a new JIRA ticket if there already one that exists, right? Because the last thing I want is duplicate tickets, right? Because then it looks like there's more work than there really is. So I want to go out and actually see, is there already a ticket? Did somebody else already flag this? So now I can actually go out and do that check. Tell me what tickets are there. If there's not a ticket, right, I can have this condition that's set to say only run, right, if there is not an existing JIRA ticket. So I can add in things like those conditions there. And if there isn't one, create one. Right? If there is, hey, Dynatrace has all this really great information that tells me where this security vulnerability came from and what applications it's impacting and what databases it's touching. Let's take that information and add that to the ticket. So now we're just adding to that collaboration capability that we want to make sure all of our teams have the right information at the right times and in one place. So we can kind of pull all of that together as we're coming through as well. And then, of course, we have to tell people that we created the ticket, right? Otherwise, nobody's looking at it. So we can actually go through and pick that up as well. And again, you'll see how easy it is where I can actually go through and switch out things like the different connection and different endpoints that are set up, because I might have, maybe there's different Slack groups that I want to send this to, depending on what the application is and where it's coming from. So I can kind of pick and choose where I want to be able to send that to as I'm going through. So
Absolutely.
4 minutes left, Brian. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add or anything else you want to.
Yeah, that's great. Maybe we'll start kind of wrapping up a little bit here, but yeah, well, the last thing I'll just say on this example, awesome example, again, kind of showcasing how rich these can be in what they do. And the other thing too is to say, like, hey, this is not, this is a vulnerability and reporting escalation, right? So again, kind of branching out really into any use case you can think of. So this is a great example of that. Looks like we might have one more question here. Can you send to different integrations, like low urgency issues could go to Jira and high urgency issues could go to Snow? Absolutely. Yeah, that would be a perfect use case for this. You could have it branch. You could have it branch off into different systems. So totally. Oh, Ken Scott coming in. When can we take advantage of this app? You can today, actually. If you're a Dynatrace user, you should, if not today, very shortly in the coming days, because we're rolling these out kind of in batches to our customers. Just over the next couple of weeks, you should see a pop-up saying, hey, you got an upgrade, new Dynatrace experience. You can dive right in today. So that's definitely something you can do. Great question. So yeah, these last 2 minutes, maybe I'll take over the screen again. Let's see if I can share the correct one here. Let's go here and we'll just wrap it up. I'll pull up my slides. So this is where we're at so far. We checked another box, right? We like checking boxes here. So we went over automation. This is kind of our tandem series that we're doing with the observability clinic that hopefully everyone is also tuning into, that they'll run. It's great, deep dive, kind of technical, use cases and training and examples. And then, we'll follow on with the AMAs like we did today to kind of answer questions and sort of go over the material that was done there. We got one more to go, and it's build an app for everything. May 31st, my birthday, just FYI. So I don't know, might be wearing like a cool hat or something that day. I have no idea. But that's the next one. We want to dive into the App Engine, and really it's going to really button up what the platform has evolved into. That it's, again, we're not just about collecting a bunch of data and having you look at it for observability purposes, which is amazing. That's always where customers are going to get a lot of value out of us first, but we're really opening up our platform to address any use case you can think of, and we're hoping that we can challenge you with that coming May 31st here with our App Engine. So I think that's it for me. Marky, have you any final words on your end that you can think of?
No, I mean, I'll say happy birthday early, Brian, but I'm sure I'll see you before then.
Absolutely.
But no, again, this is one of the things that we want to kind of take things to the next level. And we've talked a lot about that today during talking about things like the automation engine, what you can do with it, and kind of the sky's the limit. But next time around, we're just going to blow that out of the water, right? Because when we start talking about App Engine and build whatever you want, that's where it's really going to start to grow from. So bring those questions. We really appreciate it. Again, the more questions we get, we want to make sure we're covering things that you guys care about. And don't forget don't miss the next session is going to be on the 17th. Right? Get that deep dive on the App Engine, and then you can bring those questions back to us.
Absolutely. All right. And with that, we'll wrap up. Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.